It was a chilly November evening in the small town of Maplewood. The streets were quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves swept up by the biting wind. Inside Station 23, 4 firefighters sat around their worn wooden table, sipping coffee and sharing stories from past calls. The faint hum of the radio crackled in the background, breaking the monotony of an otherwise uneventful shift. Suddenly, the heavy glass door creaked open, catching everyone's attention. Standing there was a teenage boy, no older than 16, clutching a tattered blue blanket tightly to his chest. His dark brown eyes darted nervously between the firefighters as if he wasn't sure whether he should stay or run. The room fell silent. Captain Harris, a grizzled man with salt and pepper hair and decades of experience under his belt, stood up first. He approached the boy slowly, careful not to startle him. "Hey there," he said gently, his deep voice softened by concern. "What brings you here tonight?" The boy hesitated, his grip on the blanket tightening. For a moment it seemed like he might bolt out the door, but then after drawing in a shaky breath he managed to speak. I need help," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the distant rumble of thunder outside. Lieutenant Martinez, who had been leaning against the counter with her arms crossed, exchanged a glance with Captain Harris. She stepped forward, her demeanor calm but alert. "You're safe here," she assured him. "Tell us what's going on." Instead of answering immediately, the boy extended the blanket toward them, his hands trembling slightly. It was only then that the firefighters noticed something odd about it. The edges were singed and the fabric smelled faintly of smoke. Whatever this kid was carrying, it wasn't just any ordinary blanket. Curiosity quickly turned into concern as Captain Harris carefully took the bundle from the boy's arms. As he unfolded it, his brow furrowed. Wrapped inside the blanket was something or someone, small and fragile looking. A collective gasp filled the room when they realized what it was. A tiny kitten, its fur matted and damp, shivering uncontrollably despite the warmth of the station. "What happened?" "Lieutenant," Martinez asked, her tone sharper now, tinged with urgency. She knelt beside the boy, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Where did you find her?" The boy swallowed hard, tears welling up in his eyes. I didn't find her," he stammered. She was in my house." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "There was a fire. My mom told me to grab my little sister and get out, but..." His voice cracked and he looked down at the floor, unable to meet anyone's gaze. "But I couldn't save her, so I saved this instead." A heavy silence settled over the room. Each firefighter felt the weight of the boy's words pressing down on them. This wasn't just a stray animal, it was a lifeline, a symbol of hope amidst chaos. And yet, the story behind its rescue hinted at something far more devastating lurking beneath the surface. Captain Harris cleared his throat, breaking the tension. "All right, son," he said firmly but kindly. "Let's take care of this little one first. Then we'll figure out the rest together, okay?" The boy nodded weakly, his face pale but resolute. As Lieutenant Martinez rushed to prepare a makeshift bed for the kitten using spare towels, Captain Harris ushered the boy to a nearby chair, draping a warm firefighter's jacket over his shoulders. Despite the warmth, the boy still seemed to carry the coldness of whatever horrors he'd left behind. For now, Station 23 had become a sanctuary, not just for the injured kitten, but for the boy himself. Little did anyone know, this unexpected visit would set off a chain of events that would change all of their lives forever. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the fire station, the flickering lights cast long shadows that danced across the walls, hinting at secrets waiting to be uncovered. As the firefighters tended to the shivering kitten, wrapping it in soft towels and offering drops of water from a makeshift syringe, Captain Harris pulled up a chair beside the boy. The teenager sat hunched over, his elbows resting on his knees, staring blankly at the floor. His hands fidgeted nervously with the hem of the oversized firefighter's jacket draped around him. "Son," Captain Harris began gently, "we need to know what happened back there. Can you tell us about the fire?" The boy hesitated, his gaze flickering toward the kitten lying on the table. It let out a faint meow, its tiny body still trembling, but beginning to calm under Lieutenant Martinez's careful care. That small sound seemed to stir something inside the boy. He took a deep breath, his voice barely above a whisper as he started speaking. "It all happened so fast," he said, his words slow and deliberate, like each one carried the weight of the world. "I was upstairs doing homework when I smelled smoke. At first I thought maybe Mom had burned dinner again or that my little sister Kayla had gotten into her art supplies, but then I heard shouting." His voice cracked slightly and he paused to steady himself. Captain Harris nodded encouragingly, giving the boy time to gather his thoughts. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Martinez exchanged worried glances with firefighter Daniels, who stood nearby with his arms crossed tightly over his chest. Something about this story felt off. Too raw, too personal for an ordinary house fire. "My mom yelled for me to get Kayla and get out," the boy continued, his voice growing steadier but laced with guilt. "She stayed behind to try and put out the flames, but—" His throat tightened and he looked away, unable to finish the sentence. Firefighter Reed, the youngest member of the team, leaned forward. "What about your dad?" he asked softly. "Was he home?" The boy shook his head, his expression darkening. "Dad left years ago," he muttered bitterly. "It's just been me, Kayla, and Mom ever since." A heavy silence hung in the air. Everyone in the room could sense the pain radiating off the boy, a mixture of fear, grief, and helplessness. But there was more to his story. He hadn't mentioned how he ended up at the fire station or why he'd chosen to save the kitten instead of staying with his family. "What made you come here?" Lieutenant Martinez asked finally, her tone gentle but probing. "Why didn't you call 911? For the first time, the boy looked directly at her, his eyes filled with shame. "I tried," he admitted. "But by the time I got outside with Kayla, everything was falling apart. People were screaming, cars were honking, I didn't know what to do, and then—" He trailed off, swallowing hard. "And then what?" Captain Harris prompted, his voice firm but kind. "I saw her, the kitten," the boy said, gesturing weakly toward the table where the animal lay. "She was trapped under some debris near our front yard. Her cries, they sounded so scared, so desperate. I couldn't leave her there, not after everything else." His voice broke again, and he buried his face in his hands. Lieutenant Martinez reached out, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You did good bringing her here," she assured him. "Saving any life is important. You gave her a chance." But even as she spoke, Captain Harris couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. Why had the boy brought the kitten to the fire station instead of finding someone closer? And where was Kayla now? Before they could ask further questions, the radio crackled to life, startling everyone in the room. Dispatch called out an urgent message. Reports of a structure fire on Elm Street, just 3 blocks away from where the boy claimed his house was located. The address matched the description he'd given earlier. Captain Harris exchanged a grim look with his team. This wasn't just a random act of kindness anymore. It was a potential emergency unfolding before their eyes. They needed answers. And, quickly. "All right, listen up," Captain Harris said, standing up and addressing the group. "Martinez, stay here with the boy and the kitten. Reed, you're with me. Daniels, prep engine 23, we're heading out." As the team sprang into action, the boy watched them silently, his face pale but resolute. Whatever secrets he was holding on to, they were about to come to light. And none of them, not the firefighters, not the boy, were prepared for what awaited them back at Elm Street. The fire truck roared down the narrow streets of Maplewood, its sirens piercing through the cold night air. Captain Harris gripped the steering wheel tightly, his jaw clenched as he navigated the vehicle with precision. Firefighter Reed sat beside him, eyes scanning the darkened neighborhood for any sign of trouble. Behind them, firefighter Daniels checked and rechecked their equipment, ensuring everything was ready for whatever awaited them. As they approached Elm Street, the scene before them confirmed their worst fears. Thick plumes of black smoke billowed into the sky, painting the horizon an ominous orange hue. Flames licked hungrily at the windows of a two-story house, the same address the boy had described earlier. Neighbors huddled together on the sidewalk, some crying, others shouting frantic instructions to one another. It was chaos. Captain Harris brought the truck to a screeching halt near the curb. Without wasting a moment, he barked orders to his team. Read, assess the perimeter, and get civilians back. Daniels, grab the hose, we're going in. The firefighters sprang into action, their training kicking in automatically. Despite the adrenaline coursing through their veins, there was no mistaking the weight of the situation. This wasn't just another call. It was personal now. Back, at the station, a scared teenage boy waited anxiously, hoping against hope that his family would be okay. Inside the burning house, the heat was unbearable. Smoke filled every corner, stinging their eyes and making it nearly impossible to see, more than a few feet ahead. Captain Harris led the way, his flashlight cutting through the haze as they moved cautiously from room to room. Each step creaked ominously beneath their boots, the structure groaning under the strain of the inferno consuming it. "Clear," shouted Daniels after checking the living room, but the relief was short-lived. As they ascended the stairs to the second floor, the intensity of the flames grew fiercer, forcing them to duck low to avoid the searing heat overhead. "Where's the boy's mom?" Reed called out, his voice strained but determined. "And where's Kayla?" Captain Harris didn't answer immediately. His mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. If the boy's story was true, both his mother and sister were still inside. Every second counted. Suddenly, a faint cry pierced through the cacophony of crackling wood and roaring flames. It came from behind a closed door at the end of the hallway. Without hesitation, Captain Harris signaled for Daniels to douse the area with water while he kicked the door open. Inside, they found a young girl, no older than 8, huddled in the corner, coughing violently as she clutched a stuffed rabbit to her chest. "Kayla!" Captain Harris exclaimed, recognizing her instantly from the boy's description. She looked up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes, too frightened to move. "It's okay, sweetheart," he said soothingly, kneeling beside her. "We're here to help." With Daniels covering them, Captain Harris scooped the girl into his arms and hurried back toward the staircase. But as they descended, the floor above them gave a loud groan, sending shards of plaster raining down. The entire house seemed ready to collapse. "We need to go now," Reed shouted from below, waving them forward. Just as they reached the front door, another figure emerged from the smoke. A woman, her face streaked with soot and exhaustion. Clutching her side, she stumbled toward them, calling out weakly, "Is Kayla safe? Is my baby safe?" "She's right here," Captain Harris assured her, handing the girl over to Reed, who guided them both outside to safety. But something about the woman's appearance struck Captain Harris as odd. Her clothes were singed, yes, but not nearly, as badly as they should have been if she'd been fighting the fire from the start. And her hands, they weren't burned at all. Back outside, the crowd erupted into cheers as the firefighters carried the survivors to safety. Yet amid the relief, Captain Harris couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't adding up. Who exactly was this woman? And why did the boy seem so certain his mother hadn't made it out? As ambulances arrived to tend to the injured, Captain Harris glanced back at the smoldering remains of the house. Somewhere deep inside, he knew the answers lay hidden within those charred walls, and uncovering the truth might change everything. The survivors, Kayla and the mysterious woman, claiming to be her mother, were quickly whisked away by paramedics, their faces pale but alive. Neighbors gathered around, offering blankets and murmured words of comfort. Despite the relief that 2 lives had been saved, an unsettling tension lingered in the air. Captain Harris stood at the edge of the scene, his arms crossed tightly over his chest as he watched the chaos unfold. Something about the woman didn't sit right with him. Her demeanor was calm, almost detached, despite the trauma she'd supposedly endured. Most mothers would have been frantic, clinging to their child or sobbing with relief. But this woman? She barely acknowledged Kayla once they were outside, instead speaking quietly to one of the paramedics before climbing into the ambulance without a backward glance. Firefighter Reed approached Captain Harris, his helmet tucked under his arm. "What do you think?" he asked cautiously, sensing the unease radiating off his captain. "I don't know yet," Captain Harris admitted, his voice low enough not to be overheard. "But something's off. That boy back at the station, he said his mom stayed behind to fight the fire. He sounded sure she wasn't coming out." Reed frowned, glancing toward the ambulance where the woman now sat. "You think she's lying? Pretending to be someone she's not?" "It's possible," Captain Harris replied grimly. "Or maybe there's more to this story than we're seeing. Either way, we need answers, and fast." Back at Station 23, Lieutenant Martinez and the boy sat in tense silence. The kitten, now wrapped snugly in a warm blanket, slept peacefully on a nearby table. Its tiny body rose and fell steadily, a small beacon of hope amidst the uncertainty swirling around them. Martinez glanced at the boy, who hadn't moved since they left. His eyes were fixed on the floor, his expression unreadable. She could see the weight of guilt and fear pressing down on him, threatening to crush whatever resolve he had left. "Hey," she said softly, pulling up a chair beside him. "You did good tonight, bringing that kitten here, and your sister's safe because of us. That's something to hold on to, okay?" The boy nodded weakly but didn't respond. After a moment he whispered, "Do you think Mom made it out?" Martinez hesitated, unsure how much to say. "We found someone inside who says she's your mom. She's with the paramedics now." His head snapped up, his dark eyes widening, with a mixture of hope and confusion. She's alive?" he stammered. "But I saw the flames. I thought she couldn't." "She survived," Martinez confirmed gently. "But we're still figuring things out. There are some questions we need answered." Before the boy could reply, the sound of footsteps echoed through the station. Captain Harris and the rest of the team returned, their faces smudged with soot and exhaustion etched into every line. The boy immediately stood, his hands trembling, as he searched their expressions for answers. "Is Kayla okay?" he asked urgently. "Did you find Mom?" Harris exchanged a glance with Martinez before turning to the boy. "Your sister's safe. She's with the medics now and—" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "There's a woman who claims to be your mother. We brought her out of the house." The boy froze, his face paling even further. "Claims?" he repeated, his voice barely audible. "What does that mean?" Harris sighed, running a hand over his weary face. "Son, when we got there, she wasn't where you said your mom would be. She came out of a different part of the house and, well, she doesn't look like someone who's been fighting a fire all night." For a long moment, no one spoke. The boy stared at Harris, his mind racing. Then slowly he shook his head. "That's not my mom," he said firmly, his voice cracking with emotion. "I don't know who that is, but it's not her." The room fell silent, the gravity of his words sinking in. If the boy was telling the truth, then who was the woman in the ambulance? And what had really happened to his mother? Captain Harris straightened, his instincts telling him they were dealing with something far bigger than a simple house fire. "All right," he said finally, his tone resolute. "Let's figure this out. But first we need to talk to that woman, and fast." As the firefighters prepared to leave again, the boy clutched the edges of the jacket tighter around himself, his heart pounding. Whatever secrets lay hidden in the ashes of his home, he knew one thing for certain. The truth wouldn't stay buried for long. The hospital waiting room was quiet except for the soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the occasional shuffle of nurses passing by. Captain Harris, Lieutenant Martinez, and firefighter Reed sat in stiff plastic chairs, their uniforms still bearing traces of soot from the fire. Across from them, the woman who claimed to be the boy's mother sat with her hands clasped tightly. In her lap, her face unreadable. She looked up as Captain Harris leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "Ma'am," he began, his tone firm but respectful. "We need to clear some things up for everyone's sake." The woman nodded slowly, her dark eyes meeting his without hesitation. "Of course," she said, her voice calm but tinged with a strange detachment. "Ask me anything." Harris studied her carefully before speaking. "When we found you inside the house, you were in a part of the building that hadn't been touched by flames yet. That doesn't match what your son told us, that his mother stayed behind to fight the fire." The woman's expression didn't falter, but there was a flicker of something in her gaze. Guilt? Fear? It was hard to tell. "I'm sorry if my story confused him," she replied smoothly. "But I assure you I am his mother. My name is Angela Carter." Reed exchanged a skeptical glance with Martinez, who subtly shook her head. They weren't buying it. Not fully, at least. "And how did you end up separated from your children?" Harris pressed, leaning closer. "Your son thought you were trapped upstairs." Angela hesitated just briefly before answering. "I was trying to save our family photo album. It's all we have left of, well, everything. By the time I realized the fire had spread too far, I couldn't get back to them. So I hid in the safest spot I could find until help arrived." It sounded plausible enough, but something about her explanation felt rehearsed, like she'd prepared it beforehand. Harris narrowed his eyes slightly, sensing cracks in her story. "If you're really their mother, then why didn't your son recognize you when we brought you out?" For the first time, Angela's composure wavered. She glanced down at her her fingers twisting nervously. "He's probably in shock," she said quietly. "Losing a home can do that to anyone, especially a child." Before Harris could respond, the door to the waiting room opened and Kayla, the little girl rescued from the fire, peeked inside. Her wide eyes scanned the room until they landed on Angela. Without saying a word, she ran over and threw her arms around the woman, burying her face in her shoulder. "Mommy," Kayla cried, her voice muffled against Angela's jacket. "I was so scared." Everyone froze, stunned by the unexpected display of affection. Even Harris and his team exchanged uncertain glances. If Kayla believed this woman was her mother, then who were they to argue? But the boy wasn't convinced. He stood in the doorway, his fists clenched at his sides as he watched the scene unfold. His face was pale, his jaw set in determination. Slowly he stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "That's not Mom," he said firmly, his words sharp and unwavering. "Kayla doesn't know any better right now, but I do. That's not her." Kayla pulled back, looking between the boy and Angela with confusion. "What are you talking about, Marcus?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Of course it's Mommy." Marcus shook his head, tears brimming in his eyes. "No, Kayla, it's not. Think about it. Where's her necklace, the one she always wears? Where's the scar on her hand from when she cut herself making dinner last year?" Kayla frowned, glancing at Angela's bare neck and unmarked hands. For a moment, doubt flickered across her young face. But then she shook her head stubbornly. "You're wrong, Marcus. Stop lying." Angela placed a comforting hand on Kayla's shoulder, her expression calm but guarded. "It's okay, sweetheart," she murmured. "Your brother's just upset. We'll figure this out together." Captain Harris watched the exchange closely, his instincts screaming that the truth was buried somewhere beneath the lies. Whoever Angela really was, she clearly knew more than she was letting on. And Marcus, despite his grief and fear, wasn't backing down. "We'll sort this out," Harris promised, standing up. "But first we need to talk to someone who can confirm your identity. Until then, no one goes anywhere." As the firefighters escorted Angela and the children to separate rooms for questioning, Marcus lingered behind, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. He looked at Harris, his eyes filled with desperation. "Please," he whispered. "Find my real mom. She wouldn't leave us unless—" His voice trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. But Harris understood. Somewhere deep inside, Marcus already feared the worst, and it was up to them to uncover the truth. The tension in Station 23 was palpable as Captain Harris and his team gathered around a cluttered table, their faces illuminated by the glow of an old computer monitor. On the screen was a grainy photo pulled from public records, a smiling woman with kind eyes and a faint scar running across her right hand. It was Marcus's mother, or at least the woman listed as such. She doesn't, Look anything like Angela, Lieutenant Martinez muttered, tapping the screen for emphasis. Different hair, different build. Even the way she smiles feels off. Firefighter Reed nodded grimly. And according to the neighbor we spoke to earlier, Mrs. Carter, Marcus's real mom, had been home alone with the kids all evening. No visitors, no strange cars parked outside. So who is this Angela person? Captain Harris leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples as he processed the information. We're missing something big here, he said finally. Angela knows. Those kids, but not well enough to fool Marcus. And if she's lying about being their mom, then why pretend at all? Before anyone could respond, the door to the station creaked open, and Marcus appeared in the doorway. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with determination. Did you find out anything? He asked, his voice steady despite the exhaustion etched into every line of his young face. Harris gestured for him to sit, exchanging a quick glance with Martinez before addressing the boy. We're working on it, Marcus, but I need you to tell me everything you remember about tonight. Anything unusual, no matter how small. Marcus hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. After a moment, he began speaking, his words slow and deliberate. Mom sent me upstairs to grab Kayla when she smelled smoke. She told us to get out while she tried to stop the flames. That's the last time I saw her. And what about Angela? Harris prompted gently. Have you ever met her before tonight? Marcus shook his head. No, never. But... He paused, biting his lip as if debating whether to continue. But Kayla might have. The room fell silent, everyone exchanging puzzled glances. What do you mean? Martinez asked carefully. Kayla goes to daycare during the week, Marcus explained. Sometimes Mom has trouble paying for it, so she lets one of the teachers watch her after hours instead. I don't know her name, but Kayla talks about her a lot. She calls her Miss Angie. Reed straightened, his brow furrowing. You think Angela works at the daycare? That she used Kayla to fake her way into your family? I don't know, Marcus admitted, his voice cracking slightly. But it makes sense, doesn't it? Why else would Kayla trust her so easily? Harris stood up abruptly, his mind racing. If Angela had ties to the daycare, then perhaps she'd been planning this all along. But why? What could she possibly gain from impersonating Marcus's mother? We need to check the daycare records, Harris declared, grabbing his coat. Martinez, stay here with Marcus and keep digging online. Reed, you're with me. We're heading there now. At Little Star's daycare, the lights were dimmed, signaling the end of another long day. A middle-aged receptionist looked up in surprise as Harris and Reed entered, their badges flashing in the low light. We're looking for someone named Angie, or Angela, Harris said without preamble. She works here part-time, maybe watches. Kids after hours? The receptionist frowned, flipping through a binder on her desk. Angela Thompson, she murmured after a moment. She started working here 6 months ago. Quiet woman, keeps to herself mostly. Why? Is something wrong? Harris exchanged a glance with Reed. Possibly. Do you have her address or emergency contact info? The receptionist handed over a slip of paper, her expression growing concerned. Is she in trouble? Harris didn't answer, already heading toward the door. As they climbed back into the truck, Reed glanced at him. You think she set the fire? I don't know yet, Harris admitted grimly. But if she did, we'll find out soon enough. Back at the hospital, Angela sat quietly in a private room, her calm demeanor beginning to falter. She stared at the wall, her hands trembling slightly as she realized the firefighters weren't giving up. Not until they uncovered the truth, hidden beneath the ashes. The drive to Angela Thompson's address felt longer than it should have, each mile stretching under the weight of unanswered questions. Captain Harris gripped the steering wheel tightly, his mind replaying every detail they'd uncovered so far. When they finally arrived at a small, weathered apartment building on the outskirts of town, the tension in the air was almost suffocating. Harris and Reed climbed out of the truck, their boots crunching against the gravel driveway. The building looked abandoned, its windows dark and its walls covered in peeling paint. As they approached Angela's unit, Harris knocked firmly on the door, his hand hovering near his radio just in case. After a long pause, the door creaked open slightly, revealing Angela herself. Her calm exterior had cracked. Her eyes were wide, with panic, and her hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the doorframe. "Captain Harris," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," Harris replied evenly, stepping closer. "About the fire, about Marcus and Kayla, and about why you're pretending to be their mother." Angela hesitated, glancing over her shoulder into the dimly lit apartment. For a moment it seemed like she might slam the door shut and run, but then, with a resigned sigh, she stepped aside, allowing them to enter. Inside, the apartment was sparsely furnished, its few belongings scattered haphazardly across the room. On a cluttered table sat an open laptop, its screen displaying photos of Marcus and Kayla, snapshots taken from school events and daycare outings. It was clear Angela had been watching them closely for months. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," Angela admitted finally, sinking onto the couch. Her voice shook as she spoke. "I just wanted to help." "Help how?" Reed asked sharply, crossing his arms. "By setting their house on fire? By lying to those kids?" "No," Angela exclaimed, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't start the fire, I swear. I went there because I thought I could save them." Harris frowned, leaning forward. "Save them from what?" Angela took a deep breath, steadying herself before continuing. "Their mom. Marcus is real. She owed money to some dangerous people. Loan sharks, mostly. I overheard them talking at the daycare one day. They threatened her, said if she didn't pay up soon, they'd come after her family." Marcus's words echoed in Harris's mind. "Mom has trouble paying for daycare. Everything started falling into place. I couldn't let that happen." Angela continued, her voice breaking. "So when I saw the fire trucks heading toward their house tonight, I panicked. I thought maybe someone else had gotten to them first. I ran inside to make sure Kayla was safe, and then once I got her out, I figured I could protect both of them. Pretend to be their mom until I figured out what to do next." Reed exchanged a skeptical glance with Harris, but the captain remained silent, letting Angela finish. "But where's their real mom now?" Harris asked quietly. "Did she escape the fire?" Angela shook her head, her expression filled with sorrow. "She never made it out. I found her upstairs unconscious. By the time I realized she wasn't breathing, she trailed off, unable to continue." Harris closed his eyes, the weight of the truth settling heavily on his shoulders. Marcus's worst fear had been confirmed. His mother hadn't survived the fire. And while Angela's intentions may not have been malicious, her actions had only added to the chaos. Back at the hospital, Marcus listened silently as Harris explained everything. Tears streamed down his face, but he didn't cry out or collapse. Instead, he hugged Kayla tightly, vowing to take care of her no matter what. In the end, Angela faced charges for impersonation and obstruction, but her role in protecting the children earned her leniency. As for Marcus and Kayla, they found solace in knowing their mother had died trying to save them. A hero in every sense of the word. And though the scars left by the fire would linger forever, the bond between siblings burned brighter than ever, a flame that could never be extinguished.